Meeting called to order. The time is 7 p.m. Public portion of the meeting begins. The New Jersey Open Public Meeting Law was enacted to ensure the rights of public to have advance notice of and to attend meetings of public bodies at which any business affecting their interests is discussed or acted upon. In accordance with the provisions of this act, the business administrator board secretary has caused notice of this meeting to be published by having the date, time, and place thereof posted on the bulletin board of the municipal building, communicated to the Herald News, the Record, and filed with the clerk of the Borough of Hawthorne. Roll call, please.
Mr. Carr?
Here.
Mr. Clavijo?
Here.
Ms. Erentrup?
Here.
Dr. Morrell? Mr. Palouse? Mr. Reicher?
Here.
Mr. Shortway?
Here.
Mr. Totaro?
Here.
Ms. Scott?
Here. Please join me for the flag salute. Meeting regulations. During each regular meeting, 2 opportunities are provided for citizens to ask questions and to make comments. During the first opportunity, early on the agenda, the meeting is open to the public for the purpose of addressing items listed for approval on this agenda only. The second opportunity occurs just prior to adjournment, when citizens may address any subject matter that is pertinent to and/or directly related to the operation of the school district. Persons wishing to speak must, upon being recognized, rise, state their name, address, and subject matter. Comments and questions shall be addressed to the board president or presiding officer and shall be limited to 5 minutes per person. The board may or may not respond to issues raised by members of the public at the time they are raised, but will provide a response if and when appropriate. The board asks that members of the public be courteous and mindful of the rights of other individuals when speaking. Please note that the board will not respond to comments regarding students or board employees in light of the privacy rights held by those individuals. Moreover, the board discourages comments about such individuals and will not be responsible for such comments. Members of the public who choose to speak during this public session should carefully consider their comments, since they could be held personally liable for any statements they make. Finally, please note that in accordance with district policy, the board would not officially comment or respond to any matter mentioned unless it can confirm the matter has first been brought to the attention of the appropriate school personnel in an attempt to resolve the issue. Public be heard, agenda items only. Seeing as we have no public comment, correspondence, I don't think we have anything either. Reports. Mr. Fox.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. As the school year is coming to a close, there's a lot of things to report on and events taking place. Last week, the election for the 2022-2023 Student Council Executive Board took place. The results are as follows. The new Board of Ed Rep is Paul Dewar, the new PR Secretary is Emily Backer, the new Recording Secretary is Sophia Basilone, the new Treasurer is Ava Iavino, the new Vice President is Leah Alves, and the new President is Emily Barbieri. Congrats, and thanks to everyone who voted at lunch. The art show was a huge success. Great job to Ms. Russo, Mr. DiLeonardo, and all of our talented students. Creative Writing Club also held its annual Poetry Day in the courtyard. Senior prom took place last Thursday at the Venetian in Garfield. Everyone had a blast. Thanks to Ms. Russo, Mr. McMahon, Mr. Warner, and everyone else for putting together this event and all of our other senior activities. The following morning, seniors enjoyed a nice breakfast sponsored by Stewart's Deli. On June 13th, seniors will enjoy a trip to Dorney Park. Tomorrow, senior superstars on the football field, which includes the events of kickball, speedball, tug-of-war, volleyball, and relays. After a fun day, seniors will get to enjoy treats from 3 food trucks. This Thursday, scholarship night in the auditorium at 6:30. Congrats to everyone who will be receiving a scholarship. All of your hard work up to this point has paid off. 8th graders have their trip to Black Bear Lake on June 10th, following their 8th grade dance at Macaluso's on June 13th. LMS graduation June 16th, followed by HHS graduation June 17th at 6:30. Softball finished their season 16-6. They beat West Caldwell Tech in the first round of the state tournament 10-0 to advance to the second round. Congrats to Coach Mook for winning Passaic County Coach of the Year. Baseball finished their season 16-9-1. They beat Kittatinny in the first round of states 7-2. The softball and baseball teams had impressive seasons. Boys lacrosse finished their season with 8 wins. Congratulations to the girls track team on their third place finish at the Passaic County Track Championships. Sabrina DiFilippo came in second in the 200 and third in the 100. Brianna Andreoli won the 200 and the javelin with a school record of 136 feet. The 4x100 team of Leah Alves, Sabrina DiFilippo, Ella Sachs, and Brianna Andreoli won the gold, setting a school record of 50.32. Congrats to the girls track team on their second place finish at the state sectional meet. The 4x100 team won the gold and set a meet record. Brianna Andreoli and Sabrina DiFilippo came in first and second in the 100 and first and third in the 200. Brianna also won the javelin, setting a meet record in that event as well. Sophia Matreski took medals in both the shot and the discus. Leah Alves came in third in the high hurdles and fifth on the triple jump. On the boys' side, Jason Harmer won the 1600, JC Mendoza came in sixth place in the 200, the 4x100 team of Jordan Mora, JC Mendoza, Tyler Lizardo, and Alex Robinson came in sixth, and the 4x800 team of Jason Harmer, Cody Marizzo, Steven Sweetman, and Luca LaMonica came in third. Great job by the Bears. Medalists will be competing at the Group 1 state championships this weekend. Congratulations to the girls' flag football team. The girls advanced to the championship, defeating Hillside 18-0, but came up short against Irvington in the championship game. They finished the regular season undefeated and finished their season overall 10-1. That's very impressive for its inaugural season. Congrats, girls. Spring Sports Awards were yesterday to honor our spring athletes. This Sunday is the Senior Athletic Brunch at the Brownstone. The High School Library and Media Center will highlight two important national events in June. To highlight Pride Month, the library offers faculty instructional materials and resources and promotes awareness through daily morning announcements and social media. On June 2nd, National Gun Violence Awareness Day, the library sponsored the national movement Wear Orange Should Take a Stand Against Gun Violence. This month, students on the library crew were each acknowledged with certificates for recording their volunteer hours. Book circulation in the library this year hit a milestone at 913 checkouts. Next year, we'll shoot for 1,000. Fiction books hit the 400 mark. Most popular nonfiction books fell into the social sciences and history categories. The entire library year-end report will be available on the Library Media Center website on June 15th. And that's all I have to report, but I just want to give a huge thank you to Ms. Russo and the administration for selecting me out of the individuals that ran for the Board of Ed rep position last year. It's been a true honor being able to represent the student body at HHS. I also want to thank Superintendent Sprito and all of the board members for being so welcoming and kind to me over the past 10 months. Prior to the first meeting, I wasn't sure what to expect. Now I'm happy to say that I enjoyed every minute of this experience, even the meetings that ran over 2 hours. And I will take the things I've learned from this with me through college and my adult life. After gaining insight of what goes on behind the scenes to make everything at school and in our district happen, I can truly say that I'm proud to graduate from Hawthorne High School, knowing that every board member wants the best for every single student. Thanks again for listening to all of my sometimes lengthy reports, and I will miss doing this every month. And that's all I have to report.
Thank you, Angela. Thank you so much for joining us up here. The student voice, as you know, I have my own high school where I don't know anything about or from, so everything we hear from you is so valuable, and you're a very important part of our team. Mr. Sprito, Superintendent's report.
Thank you very much. Okay, just a few things to share. First, I want to just echo Angela's comments at the end of the school. I can't believe we're coming to the end of another school year. It's gone fast. It's been a little nutty, but it's gone fast. And I just want to take a moment to thank all of our administrators, our faculty and staff for all their efforts this year. I also want to thank all the parents for their support. You know, we forget all that the students have gone through over the last couple of years, and transitioning back to full-time in-person instruction was not easy. So, you know, I appreciate all the efforts of everyone involved, including our parents who supported some of the new initiatives this year and things that we tried to do to support the students in their transition back to in-person instruction. And, you know, obviously since COVID began in 2020, we faced a lot of unique challenges, and this year was no exception. And although COVID numbers were better this year, we did face the challenge of getting our students back into the environment of being in school full day, and that whole idea of socialization and being together with one another. So, you know, going forward, we look forward to our continued partnership with our parents as we continue to do our best to ensure the success of all of our students here in the Hawthorne Public Schools. And I'll just say that the old saying, "It takes a village to raise a child," continues to be true, and that was never more evident than this past year. So again, I just want to thank everybody for their support and their efforts throughout this challenging year. I also want to congratulate, as Angela did, all of our student athletes who competed in spring sports, and not just in spring sports, but throughout the school year. We had another very successful school year, another successful spring season for sure. And you know, as if you attended the Spring Sports Awards last night, there were a lot of recognition and awards and accolades for our student athletes. Obviously, it starts with our coaching staff. You know, our coaches do such a great job and work so hard to put our athletes in the best position possible to be successful. So I appreciate their hard work and dedication to our sports programs. And as Angela mentioned, we look forward to honoring our seniors one last time in our senior brunch on Sunday morning at the Brownstone. It's always a fun event, and I look forward to that event every year. I also want to congratulate our new student council officers. Look forward to working with them. And of course, working with Paul as our new student rep, who will be sitting up here. And you guys all met Paul at our last meeting when he was recognized to receive an award at our last board meeting. So look forward to having Paul replace Angela, who's done a fantastic job. Also, May and June, as we all know, are very busy months with many dinners, celebrations, end-of-year events. And I want to share, you know, honestly, for me, those are the highlights of the year for me, because not me, but we all get to recognize our students and all of the great things they've done throughout the year. And I'm just so proud of how our students, not just our student athletes, but our students in all of the events that they participate in throughout the year, of how well they conduct themselves and how they represent the Hawthorne Public Schools. So I'm just proud of all of you, and I want you to continue to keep doing the great things that you're doing in our school district. And we look forward to, again, a few more events to go. We have scholarship night coming up, our senior brunch, and of course, graduations in the next couple of weeks. A lot still to come in recognizing our students. Angela mentioned June being Pride Month. So in honor of Pride Month, I would like to read the following from Mr. Barbosa, who is the advisor of our GSA, or our Gay Straight Alliance Club at the high school. He just asked me to read the following statement, or share it with everyone tonight. So this is the GSA co-president, and I want to thank the board and the community for their support in creating a safe space for students to express their individuality and gender identity without consequence or judgment. We celebrate Pride Month every June to recognize the Stonewall riots in New York City and to acknowledge the ongoing process of attaining equal rights for the LGBTQ+ community. The members of the GSA and I are honored and eternally grateful to be able to attend the Pride flag raising, which was this past week, I believe, the mayor raised the Pride flag at the ambulance building. So they attended that, honored to, he says, I was honored and eternally grateful to be able to attend the Pride flag raising with one of our members attending the board meeting this past week. We thank you all so much for your support, and we are excited to continue our mission for years to come. Happy Pride Month, Mr. Barbosa. So I just want to share that on behalf of our GSA club at the high school. And finally, I wanted to say a few words about Angela. First of all, I want to thank Angela for her time and commitment to her role as our Board of Ed rep. I think she's done an outstanding job representing Hawthorne High School and sharing the many wonderful things that are happening at the high school every month. We look forward to hearing about all your success at TCNJ. And you never know, maybe you'll be back here as an elementary ed teacher someday, right? Because I believe you're going for elementary education. So you never know, maybe she'll be back here and we'll be approving her in our agenda as an elementary ed teacher someday. So with that being said, I would like to share, on the agenda tonight is a resolution, and I'd just like to read what it says. Angela Natal has served as student representative to the board during the 2021-2022 school year. To express the board's appreciation of Angela, the following resolution will be incorporated into the meeting minutes. Whereas Angela Natal has served as the student representative to the Board of Education during the 2021-2022 school year, and whereas it has been her responsibility to voice the student perspective to the board at their public meetings, and whereas she has been diligent and conscientious in attending the Board of Education meetings, And whereas she has conducted herself with poise and courtesy while listening attentively to many lengthy discussions pertaining to the governance of the school district. And whereas she has presented thoughtful and informative reports to the Board of Education on issues and events at the high school. And whereas she has participated in the class cabinet, student council as an executive board member, the Share Club, Italian Club, and peer leaders. And whereas she has played on the softball team throughout her high school years. Now therefore be resolved that the members of the Hawthorne Board of Education express their gratitude and appreciation to Angela Natal for her service to the student body and the Board of Education, and send her their best wishes for success in all future endeavors. Well, Angela, we'd also like to present you with this certificate of appreciation and a small token of our appreciation.
Thank you.
So thank you very much. It's been an honor to sit here with you. And I wish you all the best at TCMG. All right? And that will conclude my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sprito. Curriculum and instruction, Mr. Reicher.
Thank you, Madam President. Pursuant to the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools and the Committee of Curriculum and Instruction, recommend the following resolutions. CI1 on page 3, CI2 through CI8 on page 4, CI9 through CI20 on page 5, CI21 through CI26. Right? Do I do?
Yes, that one.
And Act1 on page 6. On behalf of the committee, I so move.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Clavijo. Any discussion?
I would just like to touch on one point on CI9. 161 students going to PCTI, and this has been an ongoing discussion for a long time. I'm happy that the Record had an article on the topic, and you know, our focus has been, I think, right on of focus on what we do well and what we can continue to do well in our school district, because some of the things to compete against them we just can't. And in light of bringing a hockey team in or having the students be able to play in hockey, even a long time ago because of lacrosse, that was the main reason to have lacrosse, was to try to keep students here, and which we've done. And at the time, I think out of the top 10 students in that class, 4 out of the top 10 were all going to go to other schools to play lacrosse. So it just wasn't for sports. Those students were some of the best academic kids that we kept because of lacrosse, and now, you know, hopefully with hockey and with other things.
Thank you, Mr. Reicher. Any other discussion?
Good point. I got a question on the C9, right? That 1.8 million, that doesn't include transportation, right?
It does not include transportation, it doesn't include the 3 special ed students. It's just the regular ed.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Sprito, meeting Ms. Ambrose, I have a question for ATH1. Is the membership, it says it's sponsored by NJSIA, so we don't pay a fee?
You know, I don't know the answer to that. I don't know. I don't believe we pay a fee, but I have to confirm that. I
Okay,
don't want to.
because it's for the NJSIA,
It's
but
to
it
be a
also says
member of the
sponsored
NJ
by.
It's NJ, it's to be a member of that association, but
Okay.
I'll find out for you.
I just, the wording was confusing. I didn't know if we were being sponsored for, okay. That was all.
I can find out.
Anybody else? Roll call, please.
Mr. Clavijo?
Yes.
Ms. Erentraut?
Yes.
Dr. Morrell?
Yes.
Mr. Reicher?
Yes.
Mr. Shortway?
Yes.
Mr. Totaro?
Yes.
Mr. Carr?
Yes.
Mrs. Goff?
Yes. Personnel, Ms. Erentraut.
Thank you, President. The following resolutions are pursuant to the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools. P1 through P8 on page 7, P9 through P17 on page 8, P18 through P28 on page 9. Bear with me. P29 and P30 on page 10, P31 through P33 on page 11, which continued on to page 12, P34 and P35 also on page 12, P36 through P40 on page 13. On behalf of the committee, I so move.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Carr. Any discussion?
Right here.
Mr. Clavijo.
Thank you. Just very bummed to see Ms. Swager moving away from the district. She's been fantastic and just
Agreed.
big loss.
Ditto. Huge shoes to fill.
Agreed.
Any other discussion? I know it's a lot to take in. There's many pages. Roll call, please.
Ms. Erentraut?
Yes.
Dr. Morell?
Yes.
Mr. Rasher?
Yes.
Mr. Shortway?
Yes.
Mr. Totaro?
Yes.
Mr. Carr?
Yes.
Mr. Clavijo?
Yes.
Mrs. Goff?
Yes. Finance and Administration, Mr. Clavijo.
Thank you, Madam President. Action items pursuant to the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools, the Committee on Finance and Administration recommends the following resolutions. F1 on page 13, F2, A1, A5 on page 14, A6 on page 15. On behalf of the committee, I so move.
Second.
Seconded by Dr. Morell. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Dr. Morell?
Yes.
Mr. Rasher?
Yes.
Mr. Shortway?
Yes.
Mr. Totaro?
Yes.
Mr. Carr?
Yes.
Mr. Clavijo?
Yes.
Ms. Erentraut?
Yes.
Mrs. Goff?
Yes. In anticipation of Mr. Palouse's absence, we did switch Mr. Totaro for the bills for the month, for this portion of the month. So Mr. Totaro, claims.
Yes, Madam President. In accordance with NJIC 6A:23-2:11B, C3 and C4, CL1 on page 15, approval of the June 2022 bill list. I reviewed the bills this month and it is recommended that the board approve the bill list for the month of June 2022 as presented.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Clavijo. Any discussion? Thank you, Mr. Totaro, for making that switch with Mr. Palouse.
My pleasure.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Rasher?
Yes.
Mr. Shortway?
Yes.
Mr. Totaro?
Yes.
Mr. Carr?
Yes.
Mr. Clavijo?
Yes.
Ms. Erentraut?
Yes.
Dr. Morell?
Yes.
Mrs. Goff?
Yes. Buildings and grounds, Mr. Carr.
Thank you, Madam President. Pursuant to the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools, the Committee on Buildings and Grounds recommends the following resolutions. BG1 and BG2 located on page 16. On behalf of the committee, I so move.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Shortway. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Rasher?
Yes.
Mr. Shortway?
Yes.
Mr. Totaro?
Yes.
Mr. Carr?
Yes.
Mr. Clavijo?
Yes.
Ms. Erentraut?
Yes.
Dr. Morell?
Yes.
Mrs. Goff?
Yes. Policy, Dr. Morell.
Pursuant to the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools, the Committee on Policy recommends the following resolutions: PO1 on page 16 and PO2 on page 17. On behalf of the committee, I move forward. I always forget what I'm supposed to say.
On behalf of the committee, I so move.
On behalf of the committee, I so move.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Carr. Any discussion?
Yes, to my fellow board members, you may see in front of you is the first reading of a social media policy. So because it is the first reading, if you have any discussion about that, I invite you to say what you need to say or ask any questions you may have so that we can go back to the committee with your input.
Got a question.
Sure.
How does this contrast to what we currently have?
We don't currently have,
We have nothing at all.
not for board members. We have for faculty members. We did try to mimic the verbiage in both.
Thank you.
Additionally, I'd just like to add that this is a policy that we have been discussing for years. This is the first time a solid draft has come forward as something we put on an agenda. And, you know, as someone who's been on the committee the whole way, I can say that this is something that I felt comfortable with because it sort of resonates with the tenets of our already existing code of ethics. You know, we were very careful not to infringe on other rights, you know, the civil rights of us as individuals, but we are publicly elected officials, and We are already bound to a code of ethics, so we felt that if we could sort of highlight those codes of ethics through the lens of social media, that would be the most pertinent thing to do. And Dr. Morrell did a very lovely job of sort of merging several policies. Any other discussion?
Time come.
Mr. Totaro was involved in this. I believe Mr. Totaro found the draft of this policy.
It was definitely a work in progress, I know, and it's nice to see that we've been able to actually memorialize it. So thank you, Dr. Morrell, for leading the charge.
What would the process be for enforcing a violation?
It would be the same as if any of us were to break a code of ethics. Anyone from the public or any one of us could bring any of us on a code of ethics charge. Just similarly to, any other code of ethics breach.
I just have one question about this policy. Is any place in here, does it include anything about email?
So it defines social media. It defines here in the second paragraph, for the purpose of this policy, social networks shall include, but not be limited to, internet blogs, electronic bulletin boards, social networking websites, or any other online platform where people may post or communicate interests, opinions, or any other information that may be viewed by others with or without the permission of. We really stuck to a social network as opposed to a method of communication like text and email.
I mean, the only reason why I bring up email is there have been boards of ed in New Jersey where people have used their personal email instead of the school district email, and it's created issues because what they were putting in their personal email was not what was public information. So that's the only reason why I asked the question, is it worth it to put something in about personal email that every single person should be using the Hawthorne email and not their own email? And there's been a couple of cases this year that's happened in the state of New Jersey, and it hasn't worked out well for districts where board members were using their personal email because it was just seen as crossing the line that now your personal email you're sending and receiving messages through, that is public messages.
That's more of an Oprah violation at that point, I believe.
Okay.
In open public relations, you're supposed to be using,
I'm just asking a question.
yeah,
because
I
it doesn't
believe so.
say-
This is just more about the social network use.
Okay.
Well, I think it's a good point, because I think that's something that maybe should be looked at in general
But
in
is this-
regards to the, totally two different things, but regarding the email, because I know that I don't know if that everybody here
Yeah.
has that.
No, that was one of the first things I asked when I came on the board, was specifically to have a Hawthorne Board of Ed email.
Yes.
I know that not all of us utilize a Hawthorne Board of Ed email, and so I requested one, and I'll leave it at that.
I mean, if you look at the name of the policy, it says internet, social networks, which I totally understand, and other forms of electronic communication. It's just a thought, and it could be something
Yeah.
totally different than this. I mean, in light of, this is what I teach in school, I mean, be careful what you put and don't hit send when you're upset. Be careful, once you put something out, every single thing is public. There's nothing as private, even if you think you have all the filters set up to be private. Everything's public.
And a lot of the time, it's not even posting something, it's replying to somebody, like a community member's post that maybe, triggered you to some way, the wrong way, and refraining from replying to that,
It is something we can take back to the board. We did talk, from my understanding, from historical purposes, this was one of the sticking points with the emails and the texts, and we kind of went back around and we talk around and around and around about it. So ultimately it was removed. It is something we can bring back. I'm actually looking up in our policies about our emails, but it becomes a moot point, to your point, is that we all don't have, it has not been board practice, I should say, for board members to have a district email address. And so some of our board business is done in personal emails. So even if we were to do emails, then are we gonna only refer to, then we have to be specific. Are we referring to district email addresses? Are we gonna include personal emails? And that's part, I think, what the committee would have to discuss if we wanna move forward in including emails in it. If we wanna make that distinction or not make a distinction at all, I don't know.
If I may, I think maybe we need to get clarification on this from Mr. Fogarty, only because if someone does put forth an Oprah request, what is discoverable on that Oprah request is everything that's, from a law enforcement standpoint, if I were to utilize my phone for something, everything on my phone is discoverable. So I think before we expand on that, we should probably get some type of,
I did share the
decision
policy
from-
with him.
yeah,
Him and I have not had a chance to discuss the contents of it, but he has it currently. I did mention to him, I spoke to him today, told him that I wanted to have further discussion. I knew tonight was only the first reading, so we have time to, to discuss it further. So he does have it, and he told me he would take a look at it and get back to me on.
It's really the only thing that I think becomes a little bit of a gray area.
Sticking point.
Yeah.
Just to provide some clarity, previously, when we had board-issued email addresses, when it was the previous network administrator, we were required to change our passwords every 6 months on his end, and it just became too cumbersome because we weren't able to do that on our end. So those of us who did create separate board email addresses, my Gmail address is just for board purposes. So, that is an approved method of communication for board purposes. It does not have to be a school-sanctioned email, as long as it's just for board purposes. Secondly, whatever email address we have registered with NJSBA is our primary board email address. So if we were to be Oprah, that would be the email address, as far as I'm understanding, that we have registered as our primary mode of contact. Certainly welcome feedback from Mr. Fogarty, but.
That just point of order to what you're saying about the emails, and it's getting off the topic of the social media policy, so I don't want to belabor the point, but there are individuals who have personal emails, and it's not just for BOE information.
Okay, we can certainly look into that. I personally do not believe that's related to this policy either. This is about posting on social media networks, not communicating. Because then we would also have, it would be the same thing with texts. So that we were very careful not to infringe on that, as long as we are following the code of ethics, in that we are not speaking to more than 4 people at a time. That's an Oprah issue.
I mean, regardless of the policy, I think, and I was here too when no one wanted to change the passwords and they couldn't change the password. I think it's just a good idea to possibly look into that. I know our past practice is, I could make up a BOE Gmail too, but it possibly could be actually from the school district, so it's on their server and it's in their system and network. Regardless, nothing to do with the policy, just that it might be a good practice to possibly
That's certainly something we can
do.
talk about.
Yeah, I noted it for the email and what Mr. Spirito said, talking with the attorney.
Any other discussion about this policy?
So maybe for practicality, the header could read excluding emails, right? Because I think that's kind of what's opening up the can of worms. It says that other forms of electronic communication, which would include text messaging and email. So maybe,
Perhaps it should just be board member use of internet, social media, social networks.
Oh, that's a period, yeah, that might.
Board member use of social networks.
Where is that? On what
There's the
paragraph?
title.
We're talking about the
Left
title.
and right.
Ah, got it. So take that out?
So board member use of social networks.
and then take, and other forms of electronic.
Got it,
I
okay.
think that possibly might be a better title, because that doesn't even open up the discussion
Just the
the
title.
way that it's read.
Okay.
Thank you, I made the changes.
Okay, anybody else?
one more thing. So then, in practice, if what's the recommended method of addressing an issue? Should it be funneled to the president at that point?
However you would address a breach of code of ethics. Doesn't have to come to me, and you would contact NJSBA.
What would be the preference, though? Do we want to, do we want to rein it in through the presidency, or
I
Well,
mean,
right now, it just says, if the board or superintendent believes a board member's activity on any social network may violate the board's policies or the New Jersey School Ethics Act, the board or superintendent may request the board member to cease such activity. And then it kind of just left it at that. Is a suggestion to be more specific in terms of the process if someone has violated the policy?
Yes, just from a practicality point of view, because, in theory, in recess as such, I remember having been in the presidency when we had a potential issue with an ethics violation. I did appreciate that it was funneled through the presidency, so just, this is a suggestion, so that if it does come to that, we have an idea of, what's the preferred, being that you're in the role.
Okay.
So what's your preference as far as that?
that sounds more of like, not the policy piece, the procedural piece, that second, what's that other?
The regulation.
The regulation.
Yeah, that's what I wrote. I wrote provide specificity to what Mr. McCleary said, but that might be a regulation. Yes.
Sorry, the word escaping my word retrieval. Also should be a fail-safe for if the violator is the president, who do you then funnel it through? Not that I intend on violating the policy, but we want to make it airtight so that, which is why we sort of just went the route of code of conduct violation.
I would say which one has to go to the vice president, next in command.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for taking it on.
Any other discussion? No? Roll call, please.
Mr. Shortway?
Yes.
Mr. Totaro?
Yes.
Mr. Carr?
Yes.
Mr. Clavijo?
Yes.
Ms. Erentraut?
Yes.
Dr. Morell?
Yes.
Mr. Reicher?
Yes.
Mrs. Goff?
Yes. Committee and liaison reports. Mr. Carr, Buildings and Grounds and Legislative.
Thank you, Madam President. Buildings and Grounds Committee did not meet this month, and I do have a couple of items of legislative. On May 26th, both the Senate and Assembly held the first voting session since the legislature returned back from budget break. They approved various measures affecting New Jersey school districts. On the Senate side, Emergency Bonding Authority Bill S. 1892, creating a streamlined process for school districts and certain municipalities to issue bonds to finance repairs to facilities and equipment damaged by natural disasters for which the state has declared a state of emergency. Specifically, Type 2 school districts without a board of school estimate may issue bonds without voter approval. In the case of Type 1 school districts and Type 2 school districts with a board of school estimate, such bonds may be issued by the Board of Education or the governing body of the municipality comprised within the district. The bonds may be issued without the approval of the Board of School Estimate or the adoption of a municipal ordinance as applicable. The bill would authorize boards of education to approve the issuance of these bonds via resolution that must contain certain information about the project enumerated in the bill. The resolution must be adopted in a public meeting by 2/3 of its full membership. The district must demonstrate that the repairs are necessary to provide a thorough and efficient education, and that at least a portion of the costs are eligible for reimbursement by FEMA. If the repairs constitute a school facility project eligible for debt service aid pursuant to the Educational Facilities Construction and Financing Act, the district must seek approval from the New Jersey DOE via an application process established by the Commissioner. The bill specifies that the NJDOE must review these applications on an expedited basis, and that notwithstanding the EFCFA, the Commissioner may not deny such an application merely based on whether the project is consistent with the district's long-range facilities plan. Upon the adoption of a resolution approving the issuance, the district must submit an application to the Commissioner. If the Commissioner approves the application, principal and interest on the bonds would be repaid with school district funds, and the amount required for those payments must be certified by Board of Education and included in the taxes assessed, levied, and collected in the municipality or municipalities comprising the school district. Approval by the full Senate on May 26 follows the bill's approval by the Senate Education Committee on May 9th. The bill has not yet been heard in the Assembly. It is NJSBA's understanding that the legislation was introduced in response to severe damage to facilities of the Crestwood Public School District caused by Hurricane Ivan. NJSBA does support this legislation. Student Civic Engagement Bill S. 2304 permits, beginning in the 23-24 school year, excused absences for students who attend civic events. This bill will permit public school pupils in grades 6 through 12 one excused absence to attend a civic event each school year. School districts would also be permitted to provide additional excused absences for such purposes. Excused absences taken under this bill would not be reflected on student attendance records. Parents or guardians of pupils who wish to use an excused absence under this bill would be required to provide signed written notice at least 5 school days in advance of the intended excused absence and such other documentation as the school district deems necessary to prove that the pupil meets the requirements for an excused absence. The bill would require the Commissioner of Education to provide guidance to districts regarding excused absences for civic events, and the State Board of Education would adopt implementing regulations. The Senate Education Committee approved the bill May 9th. On the Assembly side, the Assembly Education Committee approved the bill's Assembly counterpart, A 1271, in March, and it awaits consideration by the Assembly, State, and Local Government Committee. NJSBA also supports this legislation. On the Assembly side, the electric school bus program, A 1282, would establish $45 million 3-year contract with the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection to help determine the operational reliability and cost effectiveness of replacing diesel-powered school buses with electric school buses. Under the program, NJDEP would select 6 districts and bus contractors each year through a competitive grant process with a focus on low-income communities, urban communities, and communities with NJDEP determines to have been burdened with environmental justice issues. NJDEP may not award more than half of these grants to contractors. Grants would support the purchase, lease, or installation of electric school buses and electric school bus charging infrastructure. The bill would require NJDEP to submit a report to the governor and the legislature within 6 months following the conclusion of the program. The report would include, among other information, recommendations for how additional funding may be distributed to maximize the number of electric school buses operating in the state. NJSBA supports the bill. It was approved by the Assembly Transportation Independent Authority Committee May 12th, and by the Assembly Appropriations Committee May 19th. Its Senate counterpart S759 was approved by the Senate Transportation Committee and awaits consideration by the Senate Budget and Appropriations Committee. And last but not least, school meal expansions, A2368, designed as the Working Class Families Anti-Hunger Act, requires schools to provide free school breakfast and lunches to students from working class and middle-income families. The bill is part of a 10-bill package spearheaded by Assembly Speaker Craig Coughlin aimed at combating hunger and expanding programs for working-class families, seniors, and disabled residents. Currently, students from low-income households, defined as those with an annual income that is equal to or less than 185% of the federal poverty level, are entitled to a free breakfast or lunch. This bill will expand eligibility for a free meal by requiring public schools to serve breakfast and lunch free of charge to students from working-class, middle-income families. The bill defines middle-income family as one with an annual household income amounting to not less than 186% and not more than 199% of the federal poverty level. To avoid an unfunded mandate, the state will provide funding to reimburse the costs associated with each district's provision of free meals to middle-income students who are federally ineligible for such meals under the National School Lunch Program or Federal School Breakfast Program. It is estimated that roughly 26,000 students would become newly eligible for free meals under this proposal at a cost of approximately $19 million. Each school district and the Department of Agriculture would be required by the bill to publicize to parents and students the fact that free meals are available to middle-income students under these school meal programs pursuant to the bill's provisions. And JSBA supports the expansion of free meals to middle-income students, particularly since the state will pick up the cost of doing so. However, the NJSBA has expressed concerns regarding the proposed requirement in legislation that all schools offer breakfast and lunch to students, regardless of the percentage of students in schools who are federally eligible for free or reduced price meals. Under existing law, schools are only required to maintain school breakfast and lunch programs if the percentage of students eligible for free or reduced price meals in school exceeds 20% or 5% respectively. As referred to the committee, the bill would require any districts that do not already operate a school lunch program to do so within 1 year of the bill going into effect. The deadline for establishing a breakfast program for students grades pre-K through 6th would be September 1st, 23 and September 1st, 24 for all other grades. The bill does not currently include funding to offset costs associated with establishing and maintaining new meal programs. Prior to receiving the floor vote, the Assembly Appropriations Committee amended the bill to maintain the current 5% threshold at which the requirement to provide school lunch is triggered. The amendment also adjusted the school breakfast mandate. Instead of requiring all schools to offer breakfast, the bill now will only extend the mandate to those schools in which more than 10% of the students are federally eligible for free or reduced price meals. While NJSBA appreciate that the amendments could mitigate the financial impact of the bill, due to the potentially significant financial and operational burden this new requirement would impose on school districts that do not currently offer breakfast, the NJSBA continues to seek amendments to maintain the existing threshold. The bill's Senate counterpart S1677 was reported out of the Senate Education Committee in March is now awaiting consideration by the Senate Budget and Appropriations Committee. This completes my report.
Thank you, Mr. Carr. Mr. Clavijo, Finance and Administration.
The committee will meet next week, no report.
Thank you. Ms. Ehrentraut, PCSBA.
Thank you, President. On Thursday, June 9th, there's a conversation with the chair of the Senate Education Committee for Passaic and Bergen counties. That's Senator Van Gopal. And it says, Senator Van Gopal would like to meet with members who attend county meetings to discuss education issues important to them. The meeting will be virtual, so if anyone is interested, you could sign up on the NJSBA website.
Thank you, Ms. Ehrentraut. As far as NJSBA, we did receive an email today from them with information about a free forum entitled School Safety, Where Do We Go From Here? It is Monday, this coming Monday, June 13th from 9 to 11:30 a.m. If anyone has the availability to go, I know that that is troublesome for those of us who work, but I will try to hop on for as much of it as I can. Additionally, I am awaiting a response from Kathy Hellowa, our NJSBA rep, about a possible extension for the superintendent evaluation. Last time you were given a 1-month extension. I have not heard of an extension to this point. Mr. Sprito is working on his evaluation. As soon as he submits it to us, as soon as he submits it, within 48 hours, we will have access to it, and then we will have to complete it, as far as I know, by July 1. So I will be reaching out to you if I do hear of an extension. Otherwise, just await.
I'm sorry, who did you ask the extension from?
Kathy Hellowa is our NJSBA rep.
Yes.
I just asked if she knew of an extension. Last year there was a 1-month extension.
Yeah,
Oh, that was related to COVID.
Yes.
Okay,
But,
all right.
I mean, technically, who knows? In any event, I did ask just to confirm it is a July 1 deadline. Either way, you'll be hearing, it'll be done. Dr. Morrell, policy.
All right, the policy committee met. You saw one piece, that was the social media policy. You may remember earlier in the school year, the board gave the policy committee to go ahead to work with Strauss Esme to do a full review of all of our policies. And so we've been a part of that process. The committee has been reviewing those policies. Some of those policies would be abolished, which you saw some doing that today. Some of them are being revised. And so that's work that we continue to do. And I think for some of the ones that were revised, there really were just a matter of like words. So I think in discussion with the committee with Mr. Spirito, some of those policies would just get approved as one lump sum because it's the same policy, but like the word the, or one of the examples where we used to call, remember the Passaic County freeholders, they're called commissioners now. So like words like that, but the essence of the policy did not change. So you may see in future board meetings where we might be adopting kind of like a whole bunch of policies, but those were the ones that had minor word changes. So that was the policy committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Morrell. Mr. Poulos is not here. Does anyone have any information from respective PTOs, CPAC?
I know that Washington has their carnival on Friday. Yeah,
I know that Roosevelt had their turkey tray.
Yes, I was there with
Wow.
Mr. Totaro and Ms. Ehrentraut. The three of us were there last night.
I did not win anything, by the way.
You won a good time. I won one basket, I did.
It's not about winning, it's a good time for
It's a
hours.
good
It is supporting, but I have to rub it in. True story. I attended for the first time the turkey tray last year because of COVID. It was in the Roosevelt gym, and I won 2 trips that I still need to take.
Yes, you
Talk about the
I
generous
remember,
one.
Yeah.
that's right.
Antigua and Barbados, here I come.
Curriculum and instruction, Mr. Reicher. No, we did not meet, but,
No report, we didn't meet.
and council liaison, Mr. Totaro.
Sure, yes, Madam President. For council liaison updates, as per my review of council meeting from June 1st, 2022, following was shared by Mayor Lane in his administrative report relative to Hawthorne School District. The mayor thanked everyone for participating in Memorial Day of Services and Parade, especially the Grand Marshal Ken Hausman and Joe Metzler. I also would like to personally thank my fellow board members who were able to attend and walk in the parade. The mayor went on to thank the Hawthorne High School cheerleaders who took second place in Passaic County Team Summit, inspiring positive change with natural highs tackling substance abuse and mental health concepts. He also went on to discuss the campaign for underage drinking. Those who host lose the most. Don't be a part of teenage drinking. The police department will be diligent on enforcing and educating members of the community during this prom and graduation season. Other than that, this concludes my report as pertains to the school district.
Thank you, Mr. Totaro. Public be heard? Seeing as we have no comments. General comments and questions from the board related to the school district.
I just wanted to say congratulations to Angela Tal for being our wonderful board representative.
Echo those.
Great job. Great job, and I just have 2 general comments. I think this is the right place, I never know.
Go for it, Mr. Wright.
I'll say it in a minute. No, I did, luckily I was able to attend the art show. I've always had work and I haven't been able to go, and it was phenomenal. I was really impressed with all the work that the students do. And this really hits home because my own daughter has those 2 teachers and is going to college for graphic design. So it was really fantastic to see all the students work. And likewise with the flag football team, I actually streamed it on my TV at home through the Bergen record or whatever it was. It was cool to see on the TV parts of both the games, and the announcer was pretty good, knowing everybody's names, stories. No, the announcer was saying, Brianna Andrioli was going here and has this and has that. Like, he knew little snippets about every single player on both of the teams. And even his interview with the coach at the end, I was like impressed because I didn't know who was announcing the game. No, he was, whoever it is, he was like on top of it, of information about both the schools. And frankly, it was just cool to watch like our flag football team on TV at home through, streaming it. So it was cool.
So also want to congratulate Angela, not just for your job here this year, but your entire high school career. It's pretty impressive. Good luck in college, yeah.
Echo the same, congratulations, all the best in the future. And, just a couple other points. As a whole, I think everybody's said it already, but talk about amazing, the athletes in general this whole season, right? Just what's come out of Hawthorne. I mean, I know I was talking to Mr. Spirito about it today. It's just, it's been great to watch, just all year, just the different teams and sports and flag football, that was great. I agree with you. It was like watching, a college game, just to be able to be, participate in that. And, just in general, just to see what we've overcome the last couple of years, but this year especially, the resiliency of the students and staff, I think has been pretty amazing. As you can see on the agenda tonight, there's been a lot of changes and shifts and things that we've had to adapt with, and that also, is a testament to our administration and being able to overcome a lot of the hurdles that we've had to jump over. It's the little things that you don't really appreciate unless you get to sit in the seat and see what actually goes on to run this district and district as a whole is quite amazing. I just want to commend everybody from staff, teachers, students, Mrs. Sprado, administration. It's just unbelievable, and I thank you.
Thank you.
Just wanted to wish Angela the best of luck. I think you did such a great job. And I know so many similar things, like I played softball, Italian club, shares, so many similarities, and you do this, and you did such a great job. So best of luck to you with that, with everything. Also wanted to thank the Bear Cave. I went there, it was their last lunch, I guess, this year for this school year. And everything was great, and I know there are a few students moving on, so want to wish those students the best of luck. And new students are coming into the program. I spoke with Danielle and Danielle. They're really excited, and they just do such a great job. So commending everything there.
New business. We do have, I don't know what we would call this.
Sam Rose.
I wanted to just have a discussion since we did have a bid opening this morning. So we didn't feel it was fair to put a resolution on the agenda tonight for a vote without any conversation. All of the bids that we received were above budget. No surprise in today's environment, but we had 4 bids. The lowest bid was $1,745,000 just for the base bid. The highest bid was $2,481,615. So you can see that there's quite a disparity between the high and low bids. I don't think, even though they're all over budget, I really don't think if we went out to rebid that we would get a better bid. That said, it is about $345,000 over budget. So as we discussed when we accepted the Signal Electric fire alarm bid, we had prior to this winter, we had roughly $1 million that we were under budget in all of the referendum projects to date. Since the winter, between the new bids that we've received for the high school this summer, for the fire alarm, and now for the generators, everything is above the budget, which I don't think anybody's surprised by given the environment that we're in right now. That said, if we accept this bid, we'll basically have no more cushion. So it does leave us concerned for future projects and budgets. The good thing is, I think, as we discussed with the architect and all today, the budget that's remaining is for the media center at the high school, the other science rooms at the high school, the asbestos removal in the tunnels at the high school, and I think everyone has a fairly good handle on that number and where that budget is. The one that is potentially the most concerning is the elevator. So that budget is the one that's the biggest unknown right now for the future. And of course, everything can change by next year when we go out to bid. So I just wanted to put that out there and let you all think about that and discuss that before we ask for us to have a resolution if we're going to award or we're not going to award. That said, time is always of the essence because we were looking to try to get it done by tonight's meeting so they can start to order and move forward in the summer. If we wait until June 28th, which is an option, it just puts, everything back a little bit further.
May I comment?
Of course.
So, thank you. Being that this is a little bit right up my alley as far as my wheelhouse, in my industry of my career, I will tell you that there are definitely concerns in regards to where the market is today, and that we've experienced 30 to 50% increases just on material and things of this nature, right? Generators and distribution, which is what this project basically encompasses. So I do have concerns about whether or not we look to postpone this and what that outlook would be. Because I do not see it getting better. That being said, that's not even incorporating concerns with commodities such as steel and copper, which also ties into this project, which would be concerning. However, I think the public also needs to know that through the referendum, never do we possibly conceive that we would be faced with the challenges of the inflation and economic hardships that we've had to deal with since the referendum was put forth, right? So I think that has to be taken into account. Obviously, whether that means things have to be pared down, I don't know, but I don't think it's going to get better anytime soon. So I do think if this is something that is that important to us, that we should strongly consider it.
Thank you, Mr. Shotaro. As this is not in my wheelhouse, what does the Alt 1, Alt 2, what do these?
So we wouldn't be accepting the alternate, but what they were for is the base bid to do the generators and upgrade the electrical, and then there was originally a plan at the high school that went through that vault across from where the equipment room is.
Yeah.
and we're not doing that anymore. We've relocated the generator to now be outside of where the maintenance room is, and we'll put the electrical panel in the maintenance room and run a shorter line there.
Yeah,
So
not-
all the alternate work isn't gonna be applicable.
So we're just looking at the base
Just the
bids.
base
Base
bids.
Okay.
Not to belabor it too, but just in speaking to the construction manager, this is already taking it into account and essentially value engineering the bid to even make it what it is on this document, right? So it could have been a lot different potentially if they were gonna go with the original intent.
Okay.
So they have taken that into account when they put it out to bid to already kind of scale it back, just to keep that in mind as well.
I'm gonna ask, I genuinely don't remember what this is for. The district-wide generators and the high school electrical service upgrades, what is this related to?
So under the referendum,
Right.
there are multiple projects, and this was one of them, and so this is to put a generator at each of the schools, you know, a backup generator for emergency, and then the high school needs electrical panel upgrades, because that's where the server room and all is.
Are there certain things that you can scale back, given the prices at this time? Has that been a discussion in terms of, I understand you said the alternates are being removed. Is there a thing to look at in terms of what's a priority that we can fix and adjust? If that's even allowable, given that the public approves something for referendum? Like, I don't know what the rules are for that.
So I think, as we were discussing earlier today with the architect and with the construction manager, I think it becomes a conversation for the board to really decide what's most important out of the referendum work that's remaining to be done. So if we believe, and I personally do believe, that the generator is an important thing, to make sure that all of the schools have that. If you didn't do all the schools, you could rebid it as maybe 3 of the schools and then have, I don't know, a removable, mobile kind of generator, maybe you go with something like that. You would have to change the scope completely. And if we do this, and then the good thing of the ones that are remaining, as I said, they're more identifiable projects with the exception of the elevator, because that's a big ticket item that we just don't know the cost of yet. The great thing is we do the roofs, another Hawthorne issue. The price of the roofing has gone through the
roof.
you know, so it's, given the climate we're in, it's amazing how well-timed the referendum has been to date. You know, and the district was able to get so many things done originally in the pandemic early.
Thank God.
And that's why we were, you know, under budget on many of those projects. Unfortunately, everybody knows, it's just the environment right now is insane for prices for everything, for all the
The
materials.
good news is we are at the tail end, obviously, of these projects. I mean, like Cheryl mentioned, we have, you know, after this summer, we'll have three science labs in the media center and the elevator are the renovations that are left. You know, we've done quite a bit, the majority, 75% maybe of the referendum work is complete. The generators right now, there's one at the high school, one at the middle school. The plan was to put one at every school, because the ones that are there are.
I'd be more concerned about there being more of a life safety issue, this particular subject matter versus
That's
some
what's
of the.
right. So just to be sure, because I have no clue about these things, so excuse my silly questions. Like, when we're talking about a generator, we like literally when the power goes out, that it's to
Yeah,
back
so
up
the
electricity?
intent of my understanding from the referendum, my knowledge of it, is that that would protect and back up support for emergency lighting,
Correct.
as well as the backup power to support the things that hold up our network, as a for instance, right? The power that supports that. So it was like really the bare essentials to begin with. We didn't even go crazy.
Right.
And so for that reason is why I'm saying, like, if anything, I think this is something we should and maybe consider paring down some of the other things that are maybe not so necessary or luxury items versus something that I would feel a lot safer knowing that my kids can exit the building having emergency lighting.
Okay, more silly questions, sorry.
It's okay.
Being that we got the air conditioning at the high school, wouldn't the panel upgrade have been kind of connected to that already?
They did do a little work in regard to that, but there's additional upgrades that need to take place.
Dr. Morrell, to speak to your point a little earlier, my understanding, having been through the referendum from the beginning, is once something is written on the referendum plan, broad scope electrical work, that money is earmarked for that and can be used for nothing else. So even if we didn't do this specific electrical work, it's my understanding, please correct me if I'm wrong, but you can't just go and buy books with it.
Correct.
It has to be, or then it has to be returned to the community. So.
Thank you, that's, I wasn't looking to buy books, but I understand your
but
point,
it
I
has
didn't know
to
what the
be-
rule was,
If
like,
it's school safety, it
right,
has to be school safety. If
Got it,
it's
okay.
electrical work, it has to be roof money. It's line item now, and it has to be spent on those exact, and not necessarily specifically 5 generators, but it has to be spent on electrical work.
So an example of that, you're 100% correct. An example of that, when I arrived here, there was money left in a previous referendum that was related to technology that we did our wireless network
Right.
with. That's money we allocated, was allocated or earmarked for technology so that we use that to purchase or upgrade our wireless network.
The initial round of Chromebooks too was bought with that one, because there was
Yes.
extra money left in the technology previous referendum,
So,
so Chromebooks.
And you have X amount of years to spend it, or,
right. So
Do the generators and the electrical work go together?
it was bid together.
So was there a possibility of looking to purchase generators from someone and then someone do the electrical work?
so separating out the bids, basically.
That,
I think you have to redo the whole scope of the project, so you have to bid it in a way that's in accordance with.
Well, we're
all the
purchasing the
purchasing
generators from
regulations, too.
this
they're
company.
doing all the work.
they're wiring them.
They're doing everything.
Right, so the company has subs, they
Mhm.
don't, but everything has to get purchased in accordance with New Jersey purchasing laws, right? So, because it's over $44,000, which is the purchasing bid limit, it has to go out to bid. And so there's ways you could do that. If you went to somebody that has a bid on a co-op perhaps, you know, for that. But then you have to compile all the different pieces, and that would be very labor intensive from our side. So I think that to have Post Kelly, who was the lowest bid, you know, they have that expertise. We don't necessarily have that expertise to piecemeal it and try to put it together, if that makes sense.
They do coincide with one another though, right? Essentially, because the electrical equipment has to correlate with the generator sizing, right? So there is synergy between the two, right? So you can't, you may be able to procure the generator separately, right? But then you're still turning it over to the installing contractor who's gonna have to be mindful of what he's installing it with, right? As far as distribution.
Sure.
So to Cheryl's point, I think it does coincide, and because of those stipulations, it's better suited going through one source.
Plus, I just think that when you have one company, you have one company who's then responsible. If you have a problem down the road and we've piecemealed it, everybody's gonna say it's the other person's, and then, you know,
And at
it's
this
just
point,
finger pointing.
and at this point, now that it's been bid the way we bid it, you'd have to go out and rebid it if you're
Yes.
gonna start splitting it up and
Right.
dividing it. You'd have to start the whole process over again. You can't take these bids and start piecemeal, like, you'd have to literally start over from scratch. To Marco's point, you don't know what that number's gonna look like. You know, if you do go back out to bid, it could be worse. The number could be higher.
It's me again.
Just to make sure, I want to make sure I understand the bidding process. So if I'm looking at it here, the company that has the lowest base bid, which is the recommendation is just to do the base bid, then that would be the company we would have to go with.
Yes.
Okay.
And the way it works, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
The way it works is once we receive those bids, the attorney reviews them to make sure everything's included, that was all the specs that are met, and everything that's included that has to be part of that bid package. And he was able to review that for us today. Just, we're saying time is of the essence, so we're trying to get this to you guys tonight. So fortunately, Mr. Fogarty was able to do that for us.
That was my question. Is the desired timeline like now? Start now? So, okay.
Well, the problem is the longer you wait, the longer it's gonna take, and then it runs into the school year, and the goal is to try to get this done, over the summer. That's the plan.
Right, so summer's only so long, right? We know that in the short term, it's just gonna get more expensive. This is a necessity. Even though it's more than we anticipated, we're still within budget. And the existing generator, like the one at the high school, that's, I mean,
It's
Miraculous that it
well
takes-
past its
yeah,
useful life.
yeah.
Mr. Rico, just to clarify, if I'm not mistaken, because of the lead times, I believe this is not gonna actually be completed until next summer, just because of the lead times for the generators are approximately 52 weeks.
Yeah.
So just to kind of get an understanding, right, so it's,
So it's not happening this summer.
a portion of it, but the major components,
Yeah.
which is those things I was explaining with the cost increases, those items have approximately 52 to 60 week lead time.
I just have a quick question about it's out of my wheelhouse, but I know a little bit about it. Is these particular generators, along with all the students that provide those things, of the emergency lights and the network and keep everything running, is there a community piece to this too? Because I know in some schools, they have generators that, you know, if the power went out in the whole town, they would go to the school because the generator would be powerful enough, or no?
I don't know the answer to that.
Like on a weekend, like in the
I don't know, like
instance
a
of
charging
a
station
hurricane?
kind of a thing.
No, in my particular school, like if the whole
Yeah.
town goes out, they go to the school because the generator that they put in.
I
I
don't
mean,
know.
either way, it's
That's an emergency management.
I would say emergency management.
Worked out through the
Yeah.
district,
Yeah.
to the community, right.
I mean, it would definitely benefit from that approach, right?
Yeah.
It wouldn't hurt.
Right, I don't know. the
Sure.
answer.
Right. I'm just saying, ultimately, I don't know if it would do that or not, but in case of an emergency, I understand it would go to other people, but you would have 5 places potentially to go.
Definitely would
It sounds like right now you have none if the generators are old.
Yes.
For like the community piece, if ever,
It's an interesting point, Mr.
that was
Richard.
something, yeah.
Like they did.
That's all I know about generators. I don't have one in my house. I just know my school.
At this time, I would entertain a motion for a walk-in resolution. If anybody's willing to
We have a resolution.
put forward
But
said
we could-
resolution.
Yeah, if the board is willing to make a motion to consider that, I can read that into your record.
Yes.
I don't know how to do that, but I would like to make that motion.
Would anybody like to second that motion?
Second motion.
Okay,
So Mr. Tataro, Mr. Carr?
yes. Any discussion? Further discussion?
I'm not comfortable with the closeness of the funds and the unknowns that might put us over, so I'm not really clear what happens if it does come over. So I don't know, I would prefer to consider somehow looking at minimizing the project to stay within the budget. I know we're within the, you know what I mean, not to be so cutting it close.
And what is the difference?
It's 345,000 over the budget for this particular project, but because we had saved money on some of the other projects overall, you're not to the negative, but it doesn't leave any
We don't know.
significant cushion for the future.
But is that money all from the intended referendum money? Or
This
from
is
the,
only referendum money, correct?
Yeah.
right, so you're
So
all,
because like, you know, the renovation of the STEM room perhaps was less than what was originally budgeted for
but
that.
the other reason why I'm pointing it out, so whatever the number is, this is not a number taken from our regular budget.
Correct.
This is a number taken from the referendum on other projects where we saved, and therefore we're able to do it. Because I think that's an important point, that it's over budget on this, but if it's been under budget on some other projects, or this is what happened with the previous budget too, with technology, like,
Yes.
and the money was left in there, no one had used it for a little bit too, and there was a deadline, you know, to use it by. So just to clarify, this money would not be from the regular
Correct.
budget that we approved, only from the referendum money that the public has already approved. Some things were lower and this was higher, but we're not dipping into the public budget, into the regular budget, that's right.
This
Okay.
has nothing to do with.
And if it goes
general
over,
fund.
how do you pay for that difference?
Well, and so that's where the question comes. So you're pushing this down the line. So when you get other bids, you want to say something?
No, go ahead, I'll.
No, but as you, you know, for the projects that we said were remaining, so for the elevator, for the science rooms, the media center at the high school, and for the tunnel, the asbestos abatement there. So you can scale back some of those projects potentially.
Right.
You know, I don't know, that's a question for Fogarty. If
No,
we get
I'm
into this
sorry, let me
situation.
clarify my question. I meant like, if this moves forward as is, and some surprise happens along the way, like the unknown with the elevator, and now there's no more referendum money, what happens?
So you can't complete all the projects that you've identified the referendum for.
Correct, so initially you said the one big unknown is the elevator, so we can have additional costs. We've used up all of the referendum money, which was specifically allotted for that. If there's an unexpected cost, how do you pay for those unexpected
I
costs?
would need to speak to Fogarty to
Okay.
see how you can do that. I don't know, I don't think you can take it right out of your general. Can you use capital reserve? Potentially, but I would need guidance from the attorney on that.
But for clarity, also, if you were to do that, my understanding is you could potentially just not do that one particular project ahead of, you know, knowing that it's potentially going over that budget, and then those funds would just be returned to the public.
Yes.
So we would just not do that one particular portion that tips us over the scale. If,
Well, then that would mean not doing the elevator.
Well,
I'm saying, yeah,
Or-
whether,
or
or
not
one of
doing
those
the
projects.
abatement.
I just want to be clear, so there still is a budget for the elevator and the other classrooms. That still is available to us. We just don't know what those numbers are gonna be. That's what it comes down to. So, just so I want to make sure everybody's clear, like the money that she's referring to, the leftover money, that's all. So all of the other projects we've done, the science labs, the STEM room, the culinary room, the science labs in the middle school, the media center, all of those projects were under budget, and we saved $1 million. And over the last couple of projects, we've used up that money because now, because of the way things are, right, and inflation and everything else, we've used up that cushion. But the elevator, the other 3 science labs, the tunnel, the asbestos work, there is a budget still for those projects. The concern is, if things continue the way they're going, there's a chance they'll be over. And my opinion would be, you'd have to maybe scale down some of those renovations, or possibly some of those other projects, the elevator project, I don't know. We'd have to see when we get to that point, which would be next summer. We'd have to look at, you know, and maybe things get better by then, and the project's coming under, you know, who knows? I mean, knock on wood, right? Let's hope that happens. But just so, I hope that clarifies.
So you'll cross that bridge once you get to it. Right now, it's an unknown.
Right, it's, you know, it's just unfortunate where we are. I mean, the good news is things have been good, and
Could have been that much worse.
it could have been worse,
Yeah.
right? I mean, thank goodness we got all those projects done the way we did. And again, we are at the tail end of this, you know, this referendum.
Is the elevator in one school or all the schools?
High school only. It's a high school.
I'm only,
elevator
I mean,
renovation.
I know they're not equal things, but this is in every single school for a generator, elevator.
And there is still a budget for that, we just don't
I
know what that
understand.
number is gonna be, that's what it comes down to.
And what if their costs go up? Does that bid change? Does their price change?
it can change.
That's it, it's final bid, and that's it? No add-ons?
Well, there can be change orders if something were not the way the specs were written, you know, and then we changed it, that would be a change order. But they can't, just because their costs are higher, they can't come back to us.
Yeah, they can't arbitrarily change.
I mean, just in my opinion, it's important that we do this because you have no generators, it sounds like, in 3 of the schools. And the other 2 generators that we have, I've heard they're on the last leg or not doing well. So it is an important thing, you know, to have them. And the difficult part with it all stays within the referendum money is obviously nobody has a crystal ball of some things would go up, other things would go down. And it sounds like a lot of the things so far have gone down that have been in the referendum project. And it sounds like something that just needs to be done that we don't even have, you know, of, not like we're replacing older generators in all the elementary schools. Right now, we don't,
They don't
what happens if the power goes out? Then the power goes out
Number goes out.
on everything, right? Because
Something else to keep in mind is that if you just looked at it from a financial point of view, like the financial planner, like your fiduciary responsibility to that money that's already set aside, we don't have a crystal ball, but we do know that inflation is like at 8%, right? And it's not going down anytime soon. So next year, if inflation continues to be at 8%, that money is eroding, we're losing 8% of that money. So by putting it to work and acquiring what we, whatever it is that we end up acquiring, we're actually counteracting the eroding of that inflationary effect, because that is a fact at that point. So, if you just looked at it from this money set aside, if we know inflation is in place, we're putting it to work rather than letting the money erode. So, just a different viewpoint this year from.
I'm not sure if this is even a question you can answer, but of the remaining referendum projects, is this what you would consider to be the top priority?
I would think the generators are important. I would prioritize that. I think there's probably areas of the interior classrooms or the media center that could be potentially scaled back. Maybe you don't do some of this plan things like this year because we had extra money. Some of the design of the science room ceiling is a little more intricate.
Right.
Perhaps it would be if you didn't have that.
And that's more of a cosmetic.
So maybe you would change something like that in the future and save money there.
Right.
And I can tell you that already in talking about the media center renovation, it's going to be scaled back, and not scaled back that we're cutting corners, but we're not gonna be removing, like, there's some of that woodwork in that media center in the high school, I would never rip out. Like, they had planned for that room to be gutted. When we've met with them already, we already told them that there's a lot of old woodwork in there that I don't wanna remove, because it's aesthetically, it looks great, there's a lot of character in that, so I could tell you that project alone, I could see that coming in under budget, because they had planned to gut that room and, like they do in other rooms, down to the, cinder block and start over, but that's not gonna be the case in that room. We may be actually refinishing some of that wood, but we're not ripping some of that stuff out, because it makes that media center what it is, the fireplace in there, and Angela will attest, right? It's a beautiful room. So there's a place where we probably will save some money in terms of renovation, because we're not gonna be gutting that room the way we've done in other places.
It sounds like too, like some of the other projects, like the media center one, like, we're enhancing what we already have. I'm a little bit concerned if we don't do this tonight. We're not upgrading the generator in the elementary schools. Right now, we don't have any.
Yeah.
I just think too, like, I like to use the saying, like, I know it's not very desirable, right? You look at a generator or infrastructure, and, you don't have the aesthetic appeal to it, right? You don't see, it's not as tangible as maybe what you see with a science lab, but, I look at it as your house, right? You don't have the foundation, you have the roof, it's gonna leak, right? You're gonna get water in it. Well, the same thing applies with the generator. We don't have that infrastructure in place and the electric to support it, Those are some basic necessities that I think we should have in our district. Whereas maybe if we look at the science lab, maybe we pare that down instead, because this is a little bit more pressing on the list.
We're voting, right?
Yeah, I think it's time for a roll call.
Do you want me to read the resolution?
Sure.
Okay, so, whereas the Hawthorne Board of Education advertised for bids for high school electrical service and district-wide generator upgrades, whereas on June 7, 2022, the board received bids for the project, whereas the purported lowest bid for this project was submitted by Post & Kelly Electric Company, Inc., with a base bid in the amount of $1,745,000. Whereas the bid submitted by Post & Kelly is responsive in all material respects, it is the board's desire to award the contract for the project to Post & Kelly. Now therefore be it resolved as follows. The board hereby awards the contract for high school electrical service and district-wide generator upgrades to Post & Kelly in the contract amount of $1,745,000. This award is expressly conditioned upon the contractor furnishing the requisite insurance certificate and labor materials performance bond as required in the project specifications, together with AA 201 project manning report, an executed A101 standard form of agreement between owner and contractor, A201 general conditions of the contract for construction, as prepared by the board attorney within 10 days of the date hereof. Be it further resolved, the board attorney is hereby directed to draft the agreement with the successful bidder consistent with this resolution and with the terms contained in the bid documents approved by the board for the project. The board president and board secretary are hereby authorized to execute such agreement and any other documents necessary to effectuate the terms of this resolution. On roll call,
Yes, roll call, please.
Dr. Morel,
No.
Mr. Reicher,
Yes.
Mr. Shortway,
Yes.
Mr. Totaro,
Yes.
Mr. Carr,
Yes.
Mr. Clavijo,
Yes.
Mrs. Arentrout,
Yes.
Mrs. Goff.
Yes. Any other new business? I would like to just remind my fellow board members that next Thursday and Friday are the graduation ceremonies, which we are all invited to. Thursday is Lincoln Middle School, and Friday is Hawthorne High School, both taking place at the Hawthorne High School field. Start time 6:30 for both.
Yes.
If anybody would like to attend, please let Mr. Cerrito know. He will make sure that you have a parking pass.
Yes.
It is troublesome if you have not been there
Yes.
before, but we are all
Yes.
welcome down on the ground level
Yes.
to be there. Mr. Clavijo will be speaking at the middle school graduation, and I will be at the high school graduation. So you can come watch me sweating, giving that speech. Any other new business? No? You have anything to do?
No.
Okay. Old business? Anything that was previously brought up that you'd like to touch on? I have one thing, Tamer, I'm not sure if you were able to reconsider or think about the email handle, the shortening of the @Hawthorne, @NJ, @.stu, I still don't even know what it is, I can't even say it out loud. We did, I mentioned it a couple meetings ago, but if you can give it any further consideration, I do think that the email addresses are super long.
Yeah, we did look into it, it's something that we can do.
Okay.
It's not anything too challenging.
Okay.
It's just something that we felt best to do over the summer.
Sure.
To minimize the impact on our
Okay.
staff and students.
That may feed into our
While you're at
desire to have board member email addresses. Maybe if we can remember what they are, it would encourage us to use them more often. Just saying. Thank you for looking into that.
Just one thing, the NJSIA fee is $2,500 annually.
Okay,
So there's a fee, it's $2,500.
thank you for looking into that and giving
No
a quick
problem.
answer. I would also like to thank the NFL who sponsored the girls flag football team. While I did not have a player on the team, I was very invested in the team, and I went to all of the home games, and did listen to the streaming of the ones on Saturday, as I was not able to make it on the bus. But very big thank you. I'm not sure that all of the public understood that it was funded by an outside source, that it was grant funded. Huge thank you to them. They paid for absolutely everything down to water bottles that were given out, uniforms, coaches' fees, referee fees, transportation. Really an absolutely amazing experience. I don't think anybody knew that it would put Hawthorne on the map. I mean, people who don't know anything about Hawthorne now know about Hawthorne. So really thank the
And
NFL.
just one more quick
Yeah.
note on that I was thinking of afterwards is, it is amazing that the kids were doing that. I don't know about every kid on the team, but almost all of them, along with doing softball and bands
Track.
and everything else, like
And track.
golf.
Golf.
Amazing. I mean, that you could, that was, I remember part of the stipulation, if they were gonna do that, it wasn't flag football or softball, or flag football or
Right.
track. I mean,
For now.
kudos to those kids to do, it's not easy.
Just for clarification, was that the NFL that sponsored it, or was it the Jets?
New York
Well, the
Jets.
Jets
Oh, the
did
Jets.
part of
It's
it,
called
and I
Giants fans,
think,
okay.
but
Best
I
team.
think, I think the Jets sponsored part of the state, and the Giants
Wasn't the
sponsored
Steelers.
another part of the state.
Commissioner Goodell.
I only heard the Jets.
Thank you for that clarification, Mr. Carr. Any other old business? No? Private session, be it resolved that the Hawthorne Board of Education convenes an executive session to discuss exempt matters pertaining to a matter rendered confidential. Be it further resolved that it is anticipated the executive session will be for 45 minutes in duration and the public action may be taken. Be it further resolved that the minutes of the executive session will be made available upon a determination by the board. The disclosure of minutes will not detrimentally affect any right or interest of the board, and the need for confidentiality no longer exists. Motion to go into private?
Motion.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Totaro, second by Mr. Clavijo. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Totaro?
Yes.
Mr. Carr?
Yes.
Mr. Clavijo?
Yes.
Ms. Ehrentraut?
Yes.
Dr. Morel?
Yes.
Mr. Reicher?
Yes.
Mr. Shortway?
Yes.
Mrs. Goff?
Yes. Thank you, everybody. Best of luck. I'll entertain a motion for P41.
Motion.
Second.
Motion by Dr. Morel, second by Mr. Totaro. Any discussion?
I'll read it.
Okay.
Whereas an employee whose name is on file in the board office has an individual employment contract for the 21-22 school year, which contains a 10-day notice provision, and whereas the superintendent has recommended that the board invoke the 10-day notice provision to terminate said employee's individual employment contract, thereby terminating the employee's employment effective June 17, 2022. Now therefore be it resolved that the board hereby invokes the 10-day notice provision on the above referenced employee's individual employment contract and terminates the employee's employment effective June 17, 2022. And be it further resolved that the said employee shall not be required to continue to perform the employee's duties during the period between the giving of notice and the date of termination of the employee's employment on June 17, 2022. And be it further resolved that the board secretary, business administrator shall provide the employee with notice of the board's action as set forth in this resolution forthwith.
Thank you, Ms. Ambrose. Roll call?
Mr. Totaro?
Abstain.
Mr. Carr?
Abstain.
Mr. Clavijo?
Yes.
Ms. Arentrout?
Yes.
Dr. Morel?
Yes.
Mr. Raisher?
Yes.
Mr. Shortway?
Yes.
Mrs. Goff?
Yes. Motion to adjourn?
Motion.
Second.
Motion by Dr. Morel, second by Mr. Clavijo. Any discussion?
Good night, everyone.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Clavijo?
Yes.
Ms. Arentrout?
Yes.
Dr. Morel?
Yes.
Mr. Raisher?
Yes.
Mr. Shortway?
Yes.
Mr. Totaro?
Yes.
Mr. Carr?
Yes.
Mrs. Goff?
Yes.
We
It's not a poker face.
If anybody cares, Tampa Bay.